So, tonight's webinar, we're here to talk about property sourcing, how to legally make money from property without any of your own money. And we do have a very cool guest speaker joining us today, Mo, a good friend of mine, who I'll bring on sort of halfway through the webinar. And he'll be sharing his expertise, having recently done a sourcing deal. So I'll be talking about some of the theory, and then Mo will come on, also share his insights and maybe share one or two deals that he's currently done, so that you can kind of see how does this theory play out in practice. For those of you who don't know me, this is essentially who I am. I'm a investor, speaker, and coach. I'm also the author of Financial Freedom Through Property, which is a book that you can get if you just click the link below. That green link that says Financial Freedom Through Property will take you to the book page. And I focus mainly on student accommodation and multi-lets. This is the book that I was talking about. So if you do want to get a copy of that, you can just click the little button below your screen at the moment. Today's event is all about how to build your capital pot using the sourcing strategy. Now, what you'll notice about sourcing and what you'll see throughout this presentation is that sourcing is your starting point if you want to become an investor. See, the thing about property is you need money. Guys, it's impossible. I know a lot of people out there are talking about how to build a property portfolio with completely other people's money. You don't need any money to get into property. And yes, part of that is true. But there's also an element where to actually get a deal going, you need some capital. You need to put the 10% deposit down, or you need to pay for the transfer costs and the holding costs and whatever it may be. Now, the sourcing strategy is one of those rare strategies that doesn't require any money. It's all about the time that you're willing to invest into making this business work. So this is why it's a strategy for people starting out in property, people who are maybe, don't have the savings or the affordability to buy a house, but still want to participate in the property market. So thanks so much for joining us. It's exciting to have you on. This was actually the starting strategy for me. When I started my property business, I started with sourcing to be able to build a capital pot. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to be talking about what and how to source deals. So I'll be taking you through essentially the 7 steps to successfully and legally do a sourcing strategy. And then Mo's going to come on and he's going to share some tips on how you can find these below market value deals, because that's really the trick of this. How you can analyze and qualify, does the deal make sense or not? And then Mo's going to end with how you can secure the deal with some legal documentation so that it is your investment. Okay. So let's jump right in. Sourcing. If you've got a pen and paper with you, or you've got some sort of notepad, please write this down. This is key. The sourcing strategy is making money by 1, helping a seller out of a bad situation, and number 2, helping an investor make money off an opportunity. That is the key principle. If you want to succeed in sourcing, you need to be able to help a seller out of a bad situation, but at the same time make an opportunity for an investor to make money. If you can bring those two things together, you can successfully source a deal and make some commission. So, first question, what is sourcing? What is sourcing? Number 1, it's like an estate agent. But instead of an estate agent working for the buyer, for the seller, or for a normal person, they're working for an investor. Think of an estate agent, right? What does an estate agent do? They come to the person who wants to sell his house. They look around at the house. They pull their reports and they say, you know what? I think your house is worth R1 million. And they go and try and find a buyer for R1 million, right? That's how an estate agent works. A sourcing agent works for an investor, someone like me, and goes and finds a distressed property or a distressed seller that I can get a discount on and turn it into a property investment. So it's like you're an estate agent. You're also going to earn a commission, or you're going to earn let's call it a fee, of successfully transacting a property. But instead of working for just the normal population, you work for specifically invested. Sorry about that background sound. I do live quite close to the city, and that's an ambulance going. Anyway, an estate agent for investors, that's the first thing. The second, you earn a commission off transaction. When you successfully introduce a distressed seller to an investor and both parties are happy, you can take let's call it a referral fee for the work you've put in. Right? The deal is between a motivated seller and an investor. Motivated, guys, it's a very, very important point. You have to find someone in a bad situation so you can help them out of it. And then finally, no capital required. And that's the greatest part about this deal is you literally don't have to put money in, but you do have to put a lot of time in, and it is hard to find a deal. So as long as you're willing to commit a couple of hours every week and you're willing to go through a couple of no's and a bit of rejection to find a good deal, this is maybe your starting point into the property market. Okay, so let's get a bit more practical. How does sourcing work? Now, there are three people in a sourcing agreement. Number one, there's you, right? The person who's trying to find a deal and make some money off a referral fee. Then there is your motivated seller, the person who's got a property, probably doesn't want that property, or maybe stuck in a bad situation and they want to just get rid of it. So they've got a need to sell. And then number three, you've got somebody who wants to buy a property. They've got a bit of capital, they've got some cash, and they want to invest. They might not want to do what you're doing, spend all the time and effort to find the deal, but they've got the money to be able to execute a deal. These are the three people you need to make sourcing work. Okay, so step number one, you need to find, right, a motivated seller. Now, my dude here in the middle with the green shirt, I'm just going to call him, let's just call him John for argument's sake. Now, John has, let's say, a property problem, right? We found a motivated seller. What do we do now? Step number two, we need to understand their need so we can propose an offer. Now, the need that this guy, John, might have is that, he doesn't want this property. Maybe he's what we call an accidental landlord. That's a very common term. That's a very common reason why somebody wants to sell. They've inherited a property from their parents or from whoever, and they don't want to deal with the property, and they want to offload it. That's a great way to find a distressed seller. Maybe this person, John, has got difficult tenants in his property, and he just wants to exit those tenants, or he doesn't know how to evict, and he doesn't want to go through all the headache to do that. Maybe he's got financial troubles, or he's going through a divorce. There are many different reasons why people want to sell urgently. As long as we can find that person, understand their need, what we can do is we can propose an offer that says, you need this, I'll give you that. An example that I can use is a deal that I was sourcing quite recently. The seller had just gone through a divorce. And a part of the divorce, there was a settlement of, certain payments, like certain fines that this guy had to pay off for his wife, or his ex-wife. Now, his immediate need, when he came and spoke to me, is he needed 100,000 Rand right now, because he needed to pay off some fines and he needed to get things clear with his wife. So he needed 100,000 Rand now, and for the rest, he didn't actually really want the property. So what I said to him is, I'll pay 100,000 Rand now. I'll pay that upfront, pay off your fine, etc. But then I get to buy your property at 70% discount. Not 70%, 70% of the value of what it is. So it was worth about 1.5 million, and I got it at 1.1. Now, because I did him the favor, I said, here's the 100,000 Rand to meet your immediate need. You don't even want the property, so whatever you get for it doesn't really matter. His need was, I need 100,000 Rand now. Then I was able to propose an offer and said, I'll give you 100,000 Rand now, and then 1.1 million when the property registers or lodges into my name. So, go through the transfer process. But I've been able to break it up because I met his need. Does that make sense? So if you go and speak to a seller, and they're selling because they just want to see what kind of price they can get. Guys, that's not a motivated seller. That's somebody who's maybe interested in selling at normal market price. You have to find someone who's going through a divorce, who's been retrenched, who's got a massive property problem. They're stuck with 6 tenants that don't want to pay. That's the way you can find somebody in trouble, get a nice low offer, and then be able to secure your investor. Now, let's say you've done step 1. You found John. Number 2, you've qualified him. You've said, yes, John's got a big enough need and he likes my proposal. Number 3, you need to secure that deal now with John. You've got to now write up an offer to purchase, which is a legal contract that binds you and him to an agreement. Okay. Now, the key thing here is, guys, 2 things. 1, you've got to get an attorney on board, please. Please get a property attorney on board. Make sure that everything that you've got in your contract is legally viable. And make sure you've got a clear exit strategy in your contract. Okay, now an exit strategy would be something like this. All right, in the contract you state that this offer is subject to finding a willing buyer at a certain price. If there is no willing buyer, this offer will lapse in 4 weeks' time. Now, what does this mean? Basically, what we're saying here is that You're saying to John, I will get you a buyer for the price, but I need 4 weeks to find that person. If I can't find a person in that 4-week period, then I don't have a deal for you, and the contract is cancelled. So it's just a way for you to exit the deal. If you don't have some sort of exit clause, then even if you can't find another person to buy the property, you still have to buy the property, and you're in a bit of a pickle. Again, I'm not an attorney. Please get legal advice. But what I can guarantee you is that you need at least one good exit strategy out of your offer to purchase. Otherwise, you are bound to that offer, and that's a big risk. Now, number 4, you've secured the price. Now you can go and approach or try and find a buyer. And this is where everybody always asks so many questions. And the questions are always, Lawrence, how do I find an investor? Where do I find an investor? Guys, it's hard. I mean, I'll be honest. It's not easy to find an investor. But what you must do if you're serious about this is you need professional proposals. Okay, you need to have some sort of business plan or business case. You can't go to an investor and say, hey, I've got this great property. This guy's getting divorced and he wants to sell. I mean, what are the numbers? What is the risks? How are you going to mitigate them? Where are your reports? How can you prove to me that this is the rent that I'm going to get and that this is the value of the property? If you can't just say, I've got maybe an opportunity. You need to have a business case for it. Now, your proposal document should have things like an executive summary, a quick summarization of what the deal is about. The numbers, so the cash flow, the gross yield, the return on investment, the exit strategy, the scenarios, area research. So you'll need to throw in a TPN report, maybe a Lightstone report, which justifies all of the information you've put in there. You need to put the signed offer to purchase in. You need to show the investor that you've gotten a commitment. You've been able to secure a deal. Quotes or supporting documentation, again, your Lightstones, your TPNs, maybe a builder's quote. I mean, that adds massive credibility if you can say to the investor, I've had an architect come in, I've had a few builders come in, and these are the quotes that I've received. So you're not just saying, I think there's maybe a deal here. You're saying, I've done my numbers, I know there's a good deal here. I don't have the money to do it, but you can pay me to buy this deal. Risk mitigation plan. So if you're doing a buy to let, can you flip it, and sell it and still recover your costs? That's an exit. And those are your exit strategies essentially. So, all right, now you're going to find a buyer, and the trick is you're going to probably get through a lot of no's. Right? It's not easy to find an investor, but they are out there. My advice to you would be go to the SA Property Network. It's one of the biggest networking platforms in South Africa, all for property investors. They've got some great opportunities for you to partner with investors and attend as many networking events as you can, and speak to everybody about property. I found that my most recent partner in property was a guy I played tennis with, and I've been playing tennis with him for a couple of months already. But we just never really got into the topic, and he was trying to get into the property market. He's more or less my age. He's got a bit of savings, and he wants to buy a property. So I'm going to source him a deal now, because I know what he wants and I know how to get him a good deal. Number 5. Okay, you found your investor. Now you need to sign a different agreement with the buyer. You've signed an offer to purchase with the seller. Now you need to sign what we call a sourcing agreement. And the sourcing agreement essentially states how much the investor is going to pay you for the deal and when that payment is due. So the amount could be, let's say it's 100,000 Rand for this investor to buy the deal from you, and they're going to pay it after transfer. So once the property is registered into their name, they will then pay you. Right? That's what's stipulated in this contract. Again, getting an attorney on board and making sure that it's all legally sound is very important. Step number 6. Now you get to the end of the equation. This is now where you introduce the seller and the buyer. Right? So John now gets to meet the actual buyer of the property. They then sign an offer to purchase. Right? The offer to purchase that you signed with John is now cancelled, and you replace that offer to purchase with the new legal buyer. Is that making sense? Let's quickly visualize the contract portion here, because this is really important. If you want to secure a deal using the sourcing strategy, you have to get this right. Okay, so you've got the 3 parties in the game. First of all, you and John, the seller, you're going to sign an offer to purchase, the first offer to purchase. This OTP states how much you're going to buy it for, or the secured price that you have. Plus, it's going to have a good exit strategy, which gives you a month to find a deal or find an investor. But if you can't find an investor, you can exit. Okay, so there needs to be an exit strategy there. Once you have that, you build a nice, really sexy proposal. You go and speak to everybody that you know about it, and eventually you meet this investor. And once you've essentially and successfully convinced them of the deal, you sign a sourcing agreement, which states how much the sourcing fee is and when that sourcing fee payment must be done. And then finally, the third contract is between the new buyer and John, and that is the OTP, the third document, essentially, the third legal contract. You've got OTP 1, you've got your sourcing agreement, and then you've got your third legal agreement, which is a brand new offer to purchase. Okay. Now, guys, why I'm saying that this is important, because the biggest risk in a sourcing deal is if the investor doesn't pay you. Right? And that happens probably more often than most people think. You introduce this person to this distressed seller, they do a great deal and they just forget to pay you, or they just don't honor that commitment. Now, having a legal document doesn't mean you will definitely get paid, but it does help. Right? At least if you've got some sort of contract in place and the investor doesn't pay you the fee that you've rightfully deserved for putting this deal together, you can at least try and take some legal action against them. Right? Again, it's not foolproof. The risk of sourcing is that you might not get paid, but the benefit of sourcing is you need no money. Right? Guys, all you need to do is you need to find a deal, find an investor, and put them together. Right? Now, the final thing that I'll say just around the steps is you need to ensure a win-win scenario. You need to make sure that John ends up being happy. You need to ensure that your investor makes money. Because if either one of these two don't win, you're going to start getting a bad reputation. You're going to start, I believe in something called karma. If you do bad things will come to you in the future. And I know if sometimes people will source deals that are kind of crappy, because they're trying to make a quick buck. For me, I'd rather suggest to you, if this is a strategy you want to take seriously, find a really good deal. Make sure it works for both parties. Make sure you help the seller, you meet their needs, you get them out of the situation as quickly as possible. Have the empathy and the emotional intelligence to deal with that person and understand their trauma. But then also on the other side, make sure that your investor makes money, because if they make money with you once, they're going to come back again and again and again. I've noticed that definitely with my own portfolios. The first time I work with someone, they're very hesitant. They'll maybe loan me, let's say 100 or 200,000 Rand. But once I give them their money back plus the return, let's call it 15%, and they're getting 5% in the bank, they look at the deal that I did and they're like, wow, it actually works. And then they'll give me 500,000 Rand. Or 700,000, and slowly and surely they start to build in confidence with you. They start to trust you as an investor and as a thought leader, and they start to invest more with you. Okay, so ensure a win scenario. The seller's need is met. Investor makes money. If it's win-win, this is the strategy for you. Now, why is sourcing such a great strategy? Well, one, it requires zero capital. Okay, only time, no money. Anyone can do it. Guys, you don't need to have any certification. You don't have to be an estate agent. You don't have to do any of those things, right? Obviously, you need a bit of education. You need to know how to spot a good opportunity. You need to know how to approach an investor. And, you need to have a power team. But that's all stuff that you can do for pretty much for free. It's not like you need to go and pay for this extreme course and get certified and registered before you can. Anyone can do this. Even I've seen school kids do this, like high school kids do this, because anyone can go onto Property 24 and anyone can spend some time looking for distressed sellers and finding good deals. People are already paying commissions for property, right? Think of an estate agent. I mean, estate agency is has a very big industry in South Africa. People often pay others a commission or referral fee for a property. So it's not a strange concept. The thing is, you just have to change your mindset, because now you're finding an investment-worthy deal. An investment-worthy deal that you can sell to an investor, not to a first-time buyer. And it's an easy way to get started. So, for those of you who are new to our channel and to our content, this is probably the best strategy for you to get started with. No capital, no risk. It's hard to do, hard to find, but definitely still deals to be done. Be careful. Now, guys, there is a way that you can do this that is legal, and there are many ways that you can do that are illegal. You know, technically speaking, in South Africa's laws today, if you're seen earning a commission off a property transaction, you have to be registered with the Estate Agents Affairs Board, which is basically the estate agency body that kind of manages the governance in South Africa's property market. So you can do it legally, and you don't have to be registered, but you need a good property attorney. Okay, so this is maybe the one cost of the sourcing strategy that I haven't mentioned yet. But the one cost is you need to have good legal representation. So if you are looking at doing the strategy, I would say budget maybe 5 or 10,000 rand. Go spend some time with a property attorney, get them to draft a really solid sourcing agreement and offer to purchase contract for you. Make sure that it's done legally. It's all in the wording, right? So as long as you're not earning a commission, it's more about earning a referral fee or a fee of introducing to people. Still the same thing as a commission, but you know the legal framework is very particular on certain words. So again, please, this is just a disclaimer to protect myself for anybody that does enjoy this content later on. Make sure that you do invest a little bit of money into just making sure that this is legal. Get the right attorneys on board. And I've got an attorney. If you need a person to contact, please reach out to me. Go search on Google. They're everywhere. Just make sure you get somebody who understands this. Final thing that I'll say before I hand over to Mo is talking about the sourcing fee. Now, this is also a very common question that I get, and that is, how much is a fair sourcing fee? Okay, I found this great deal, Lawrence. I found the seller, I've got a buyer, but now how much am I going to charge for the work that I've done? How do I know what that number is? Right. Now, there isn't a rule of thumb, or there isn't a scientific law. I just use a rule of thumb, right? And my rule of thumb is, first of all, if you're sourcing a buy and hold deal, so this is when you might be selling a multi-let, a student accommodation, or an apartment that you're going to plan to rent out. That's the buy and hold. Usually I would say you need to give 6 months worth of cash flow. Okay, so whatever your cash flow is, times that by 6, that would be your sourcing fee. That's the figure that I use. When you're looking at a buy and sell, right, so you're packaging a flipping opportunity to an investor, 10% of the profit is what I would allocate to the sourcing fee. Everybody's got a different opinion here. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong way. These are just my rules of thumb that I like to use. Okay. Let's do a quick example. So this is my most recent sourcing deal. It's a block of flats in Joburg South. Here are the numbers. So the asking price was 3.5. I was able to get the owner down to 2.8. Okay. So I've gotten a 20% discount. That's a massive cha-ching. That's a massive value add. I can now go to an investor and sell it to an investor for 2.9 million. Right? I've gotten the discount to 2.8. I can now sell it for 2.9 to someone, and it's still a great deal. I'm making sure that the seller is satisfied. I'm also giving the buyer some margin and some profit. The deal cost, there were 400,000 rand included. I charged a 90,000 rand sourcing fee. So that's how much I charged the investor for this deal. How did I get that number? From the cash flow, right? The monthly profit or the monthly cash flow of this multi-let is 15,000 rand per month. So 15 times 6 gives me 90,000. That's what I thought would be a fair figure or fair price for this property transaction. And the investor's walking away with an 18% return, which is, for them, that's fantastic, right? They're getting a win. The seller's getting a win. As long as you're getting a win-win scenario, you're doing the sourcing contract right. Okay. Now, without further ado, I would like to bring up my colleague, Mr. Mo Chopdat. He is a property investor. He's the founder of Sprud. He's a sourcing specialist, and he's also a success student of our Property Bootcamp online course. So, without stealing his thunder, Mo, are you there?
Hi, Lawrence.
Awesome, you're there. I'm going to stop sharing.
Cool.
And then you can share your screen.
Let me just get this up and running. Cool. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. Over to you, Mo.
Cool. So hi guys. As Lawrence said, my name is Mo. That's short for Mohammed. So I started investing about a year ago, and what I am right now, I'm a full-time employee. I work in the post-production industry for commercials, and we do most of the high-end commercials. So anything you've seen from South Africa that's on YouTube or on TV is probably from us. And my journey started basically, I went on my first trip to Turkey, which is photo on the right and on the left or your right. So I went to Turkey and I went backpacking to Turkey, and I had this epiphany, like, geez, I love traveling, and taking the time to save money just to go every 2 years or something. I mean, that's not for me, and the job is not really going anywhere. So there has to be another way. And essentially, there is the same time on my way back from Turkey where I was listening to the audiobook Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'm sure most of you can contest that that book kind of changes your whole mindset. And the moment I landed back in Joburg, I basically went to the internet and I Googled Robert Kiyosaki. I found legacy education. I signed up immediately and I went through the course. Eventually, I was partnered with, I chose Lawrence as my coach. And that's how I got started investing in real estate. I was also not a big deal, but I was a semi-finalist for Investor of the Year at the beginners category last year. Not a big thing, but just thought I'd mention it. So this is how I started off when I used to find leads. I actually used to spend 30 minutes a day just browsing the web. Takes about 10 minutes of my time. So I'm looking for about 20 deals. And essentially, I used to spend about 12 hours per week going out, getting frustrated with agents, going everywhere from Johannesburg to Pretoria to Johannesburg South. I mean, I went everywhere, and I had little to show for it. And essentially, I needed to change my game plan. And what I essentially done was that I reworked the way I actually found leads. And this is how I actually do it now. And I'll share it with you guys further on. But right now, how I'm marketing is that I spend about an hour just looking for leads. And I use SEO technique for attracting sellers, sorry. It takes me about 10 minutes to qualify a lead. And once I qualify the lead, which is I qualify about 2 deals a month, and I get those under contract. And the way I get them under contract is that I know my basics so well that I know a done deal when I see it. And basically, but the amount of time I spend every month is about 4 to 6 hours. So here's some background about my first rental property. This is while I was a student of Lawrence. So I think it was 2 months into the program, I found this deal in Tulisa Park, and essentially the seller was in a really picky position. She owed people money, and the reason she owed people money was that her business partner, kind of ran away with the money, and she had debts to pay off, and she needed cash quickly. So essentially, I didn't have the cash at hand, so we came up with a strategy which meant we use creative means of actually financing. And how I negotiated that, basically, based on my salary, I could only afford a certain amount for a month. So I needed to work into those parameters, and the property was worth about 620 at the time. And what we did was basically I worked on a JV with the owner, and I paid 250,000 for the property. And right now I'm in full control of the property, and I'm cash flowing about 1,500 every month. And the seller also gets something once I sell the property. And that's how I got my first property under contract. And this is basically just some of the figures. So my gross sales is about 30%, ROI 17%. I'm planning in a few months' time to actually refinance and pull out all the money I put in. So essentially, I'll be having infinite return, and I'll be owning the property with no money down. And if I had to exit the deal for whatever reason, I could be looking at about a 270% profit, and that's a touching moment, I think. So let's take a look at one of the first multi-leg deals that I have done. So it was about 2 months ago, I decided to focus on multi-let and sourcing strategy. And the reason was basically this. I was finding a lot of good deals. The problem was that I was finding it difficult to actually get people to finance my deals. And essentially, this was a waste of time for me. So I did change my strategy. And that is essentially building the capital in order to do either a flip or buy and hold. And the only way I could do it with the budget that I had was to use sourcing as a means. So how I came upon this deal was that I had my marketing going on around Johannesburg in very specific areas. And I had a caller call me and tell me she's interested in selling. And funny enough, she wasn't actually motivated. They were this old and tired, and they had a very big house, and they just didn't want to do all the maintenance of the house. So what I did is I came to the house, I took my photos, I spoke to the seller, got an understanding of who we are, built rapport, and I went back home and I put together a proposal and I sent an offer to the seller and I said, okay, I'm going to pay 1.4 million for your property. And she said, no way, Jose. So I said, fine. If you change your mind, here I am. And I waited I think it was about 3 weeks. And then I contacted the seller again and I said, hey, I've got a different proposal for you. I want to do an installment sale. And I said, why don't we do a installment sale? Say, for instance, we were doing a 20-year sort of mortgage with a balloon payment in 5 years or so. And she said she doesn't like that deal. So we kind of met a compromise where she wanted 1.7, I wanted 1.4, and I said, and we agreed upon 1.6 million. Oh, sorry. So I got the deal, and essentially what I did was I call it a catch and release. So I had a buyer that I knew who was really interested in doing multi-lets, and I knew the area was primed for a really good investment. So once I got my proposal done and finished, which took me just about an hour, I sent my proposal to the seller first because I knew that's exactly what he's looking for. And just as a backup plan, I sent a proposal also to Sapin Connect, which is basically Sapin's way of helping sourcing agents actually connecting a sourcing agent to a potential buyer. And lo and behold, the investor actually called me about 15 minutes later saying, let's book a time to meet. Next day we met, we looked at the property, he brought his builder across, we looked at the figures, and basically the builder said, I can do a lot more with this. And so basically the next day we signed the contract. And right now we're looking at closing, I think this month or next month. And at that point, that's where I'll get my sourcing fee for the information that I provided to the seller. I mean, just by the figures, you might see an ROI of 14%, and I know a lot of people will say, no, that's nothing. You need like 15 or something percent. But remember, it's a minimum ROI. So the worst case scenario for the seller is that they're getting 14% of cash flow. When you do the math, actually, the ROI can actually go up to 22% if there's no vacancy, if there's no maintenance done. Essentially, that's how we got the deal. So what's also valuable when you notice the market value of the deal is about 2.5 million, which means there's a lot of equity in the seller to actually refinance and get most of the money back in the future. So that's a positive also. And that's essentially how I got one of my leads sourced to a potential buyer. Okay, so I just want to go back and just like help you understand my kind of mindset. Like at the time before I started sourcing property, I was in a very kind of confused state of that. The idea of earning more money had always been appealing to me, but my strategy wasn't working. And the reason it wasn't working is because I was looking for the big fish, and I wasn't ready to catch that big fish. And so I took a different approach, and I went back to the books and I studied everything I've learned before, and I created areas of where there are great investments in Johannesburg. I studied the strategies, and essentially what I did was that I created a small booklet of what is my criteria, what is the buyer's criteria, and how do I find the buyers, how do I find the best deal for that particular buyer. So I really targeted my focus on very specific areas, and that also kind of like narrowed my focus and took me away from the everything approach where I'll just go anywhere in Johannesburg. So knowing your basics is probably one of the most important things. And also, I can't stress this enough, be conservative with your numbers. I know how easy it is to find a deal you think is a good deal, and all of a sudden you change it in the numbers just to make it look good. The truth at the end of the day is that a really good investor will know a good deal from a bad deal. So you'll just sorry, you will just be spending the extra time just wasting time just actually trying to get that deal sold. It's very important to always have to exit strategies ready for the investor so they know there is one. Putting your basic proposal to a stress test to see if the investment goes one way or the other, does it still work? That's also good information to provide to a potential investor. And so this is the kind of ways I go about finding leads. So driving for dollars, if you don't know what that is, basically what you do is you get in your car and you drive around neighborhoods and you look for, you go to the best neighborhood and you look for the worst looking house. So, the house that's not painted well, the paint's peeling off, grass is overgrown, the windows are probably boarded up, there's rust maybe. You're kind of looking for those properties and you're essentially taking note of these properties and you're making a list of potential leads that you can go to and you'll market to those people and ask them if they are willing to sell their house. And that's what driving for dollars is. It's basically the best way to start off. Essentially, no money down, you just go around looking for potential leads. Another way, which is cold calling, and I was very, I don't think anyone likes cold calling, but it's probably still the best way to actually find potential leads and negotiate best deals. So, if you're thinking about sourcing, you just have to get used to kind of being the salesman at the end of the day. But there's a way of doing it that doesn't offend the buyer and actually can be actually beneficial for all parties. So another method that people use are bandit signs. I don't do that because I think there's legal ramifications of that. You can't put bandit signs here and you can't put bandit signs there. I think it's government regulated, so I don't really bother about that. I think Andrew uses the pamphlets method, which is essentially also a good method if you looking at a particular demographic. So what I found is that SEO strategies, which is essentially you're creating a website and you're creating a funnel for people who are searching for a solution to their problem to find you. And that works for a very specific age group, which is about 35 to about 55. But you're also looking for the people who are older, like 65. And not necessarily those people won't actually go on the internet to look for solutions to their problems. And the best way to get hold of them is either through newspapers or through pamphlets. So door knocking is essentially the same as driving for dollars. You basically go into the door, knocking on the door, saying, hey, my seller, I'm investing in the area. I'm looking to buy your house. Are you interested in selling it to me? And that's essentially what you're trying to do. Direct to mail. So direct to mail is basically, again, you're creating a list of people. You're going and you're finding, creating a basic post that you will mail to them in the mail. And it essentially says the same thing. Hey, Mr. Seller, I'm investing in the area. I'm looking to buy your house. Are you interested in selling to me? SEO, as I mentioned, that's basically using your website to attract potential leads. Now, bird dogs is another strategy, which is actually I haven't used, but I think it's very useful in the sense that what you do is that if you get a mailman that comes around your house delivering post-its and stuff like that, maybe stop him and say, hey, Mr. Mailman, listen here. I am looking to buy houses. I'm looking for this kind of house. This is how it should be. The house is basically overgrown. It doesn't look like something that you or I would actually live in. I'm looking for those kind of houses. And if you bring me an address of that house, I will give you a finder's fee of, say, 5,000 Rand for every deal that goes through. And I do the same thing with lawyers. And if you have an Uber driver and you deal with Uber a lot, maybe just mention that to the Uber driver also. Hey, listen, you go around a lot of places. If you find a house that looks in this kind of way, please call me, let me know, and I'll compensate you for that. Another good resource is family and friends. Spread the word out. Say, hey, listen here, cuz, listen here, bro. I'm looking for these kind of houses. If you see anything, just WhatsApp me. Send me a message. I'll day something in for you there. I put investor-friendly property practitioners, which are real estate agents essentially. And the reason I put investor-friendly, there's a very specific kind of real estate agent that focuses on investors, and it's very hard to find them. And when you do find them, it's very hard to get on the top of their list. And the only way to get on top of their list is actually to do a couple of deals successfully with them. But also dealing with property practitioners as a sourcing strategy might also be difficult because there's also legal ramifications, and there's also the dialogue. When you have a middleman between you and the seller, essentially you're going to find a lot of issues there. So I've actually changed my strategy in terms of property practitioners. I won't actually go full force on that. Another way you could find is brokers. Brokers are also people who will find the deals before they actually list. So if you find a good broker, get to know them. You're not going to be on the top of their list if you're starting off. You're going to have to do a few deals with them. Eventually, you will earn their trust, and they will call you with the first deal they had before it goes into listing. So here's essentially important criteria, from my experience, what I've gathered. So you have to know your neighborhood. You don't have to go out through every town and every suburb in Johannesburg. You can just focus on a few, and you'll be surprised by if you try for dollars, how many deals you actually see, or potential leads you can actually see in the neighborhood. And you have to know the strategy of the neighborhood, and the way you can find out what's the best strategy is that if you use your Lightstone reports, you can find out what's a good rental area, what's a good flipping area, what's good for multi-lets, that kind of thing. Again, you want to look at the demographics of the place. What are the age of the population? Are they working class? Is it mostly drug dealers around there? And another important factor, if you're thinking of flipping, is the absorption rate. And the absorption rate is essentially you determining how many properties in that neighborhood sell in a specific time. So essentially, in my area, which is Meerdal, a property on average takes about 8 months. And again, if you have the tools like a TPN and Lightstone, you can actually determine that kind of absorption rate. And that's important because that's you don't want to be in an area where it takes on average 12 months to actually flip a property, because that's an extra cost that you're not paying for. In some areas I found that are not in Johannesburg, you might be looking at 2 years. I've seen properties that have been on list in certain areas for, I think, since 2012. They're still listed on sites. So it's very important to know your area very well. Condition of the property. So if you have a buyer's list, or what essentially they're looking for is very important, because an investor won't take on every risky project. I know that the saying goes that, wow.
Sorry, Mo, you plugged someone in. I'm so sorry. Client's wanting to go across the road.
Oh, sorry, Lawrence. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you just talk for a few minutes? Sorry, there's a issue.
Yeah, I'll take them through the slide. No worries. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Mo is calling in from the office, but he's talked me through essentially his presentation, so I can take over. He's already mentioned the in your target neighborhood, right? So strategy, location, demographics, and absorption rate. The condition of the property, like he's saying, you have to understand your investor. Some investors are willing to take on bigger projects, some aren't. I work with investors sometimes that have their own builders and their own teams, and they can take on fire and water damage because that's something that they're comfortable doing. And then I'll give it over to Mo, and he can continue with point 3.
Sorry about that, guys. So sometimes I'll give an example. Sometimes you find a misfit in a neighborhood, and that's essentially a house that's built in a very irregular way. It's not very symmetrical. It wasn't built to the correct standard, and you might think that's a good deal, but in certain cases, I'll give you an example. We found a house in Douglasdale, and we got it for a really good deal. But when we bought the builder's deal, the builder said, well, this isn't built to spec, and it's built in a very odd position. So which means we're going to have to demolish everything and rebuild everything from the ground up. So I don't think every investor will actually be looking for a deal like that. So you have to be able to determine actually what are the costs essentially for a deal like that. Now, on the hindsight, you might actually say, okay, if I can find a developer to take over this project to source it to, that might be a good deal, but you've got to have a developer ready to go on this deal. So there's also another opportunity over there.
Mo, just quickly, we've got another five or so minutes before we head to questions. Is that still okay for you?
Okay, let me try and speed it up.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, I think this is basically just saying, know what your buyers actually want. If the investor wants 15%, you got to find that 15% deal. You know, and that's how you also. And I'll show you how to actually determine how I determine my sourcing fee at the end of the day. So here's ways that I actually source deals and try to do it in a legal fashion. So what you can do is you can partner with an investor, and essentially what you can do is create a company, and you will sign the contract under that company. And if an investor decides to actually take on the project, you sell the shares to that investor, and you get your sourcing fee. And the investor will use that company to actually purchase the property. Another way you could do it is that investor doesn't have the money to pay you now. Is say, okay, investor, I will give you this property, but are you willing to give me some equity in it, maybe 2%, you know? And when you sell the property, I at least get something out of it. Cash and release is basically as simple as this. You go to a seller and you just be honest with them. Look, I have people interested in this deal. If you give me a week to actually get these people to you, I will make it worth your time. And essentially what you'll do is that you will bring your partner, who's the buyer, onto the project to sign the offer to purchase. So you could I've seen people partner with agents, so they split the cost 50-50. You could partner with another sourcing agent. Maybe another sourcing agent has a client list of buyers, something that you don't have. Again, you know, it's 50% of something is better than 0% of nothing. So, I mean, you're always thinking about that. You could do a back-to-back if you are more of a risk-averse person. And essentially, contingencies always have your exit plans in there. And never ever sign a deal you don't intend buying yourself. I can't say that more than enough. I mean, you don't want to, I mean, legal ramifications are, I mean, I can't talk about that, but essentially, I mean, I'm pretty sure all of you have heard that before. So when dealing with sellers, very important to build rapport. When I meet a seller, I never actually throw numbers out. For me, I need to get to know them. They need to get to know me. And I don't even give them the number on the first or give them any indication of a number on our first meeting. For me, it's just building rapport. I'm being honest with them. I'm telling you, this is my intention. I help investors source properties, and they don't have the time to find the deals themselves. So I help them find the deals, and this is how we work, and this is how fast we can do it for you. And essentially, you want to be a problem solver. You always want to know what the problem is and how you can solve it. And it's very important when you are dealing with sellers, you're dealing with a decision maker. Last month, I dealt with a person who wasn't a decision maker, and I told the person essentially, okay, I'll do the deal with you. He was giving me about 60% off from the deal. I said, but I want to talk to your mom. And I didn't hear back from him since then. So always deal with the decision maker, because you don't know who's a con artist, who isn't a con artist. And those people also will take your chances with you, especially if you're advertising in newspapers. Always fulfill their commitments. If you can't do it, don't do it. You have to have buyers ready. If you say you can sell it in 14 days, then you better have a buyer ready in 14 days. When dealing with cash buyers, again, it's building rapport. It's how you secure the deal. What kind of leverage does the cash buyer have? That's also essential. Something you can use to negotiate with the seller. And what happens if that buyer doesn't come through at the end? Do you have a plan B? So my top 5 is, think of it as a business. You have to have key performance indicators. You have to know how much it costs to acquire a lead. What's your marketing budget? Consistency. Look, you're not going to get it right the first time. It takes me 100. I analyze 100 deals before I actually get the one that looks good. So it's a numbers game. Do your comps. The comps essentially is, a property in Sandton, the finishes, the renovations are very different from a property in, let's say, Witpoortjie. So you're not going to do the same renovation budget in Witpoortjie as you would do in Sandton, and vice versa. And this affects your basic proposal to your buyers, which is essentially also, what you don't want to do is you don't want to be like Captain Ahab. I've been caught in this a few times where I've seen a property that was too juicy, but it was way bigger than what I thought. I thought, I'm going to do the extra work, get it under contract, and it just fell through, and that cost me a lot of time and a lot of effort because I just couldn't see any other way. So it's about me. So right now I am full-time on sourcing as a full-time employee, and I'm essentially looking for serious investors. So if you are a serious investor, or you know anyone who is a serious investor, please hook me up. I'm always open to talk. Even if you need a high five, I'm right here. Cool. Thanks.
Awesome, Mo. Thanks so much, dude. It was great to hear about your story, and so cool. Full-time employed, full-time sourcing. I think that's the reality. Multiple streams of income, you're living the journey, which I think is great. Let me quickly share my screen as I just close off our session today. And then, Mo, you can still answer a couple of questions with us just now.
Cool.
Okay, I just wanted to show you quickly. This is actually the proposal, if I'm not mistaken, Mo, that you used to secure the deal. And I just wanted to show you what an actual proposal will look like. So this is Mo's proposal on that multi-let that he was talking about. So the first thing he's got here is he's got a nice executive summary. And you can see this is professional. He's got a picture, he's got the description, he's got the amenities, he's got the high-level property values. He's got some descriptions, and pretty much a person who's not in the property game can read this and understand this. It's very well written. Then he's got some more of the analysis. What does the architecture look like? What are the numbers, the rehab analysis? You can see he's gone into a lot of detail as to what's the financing, the buying, the holding costs, etc. He's taken some great pictures. I think it's always good to visualize, especially in COVID, people might not be able to go and view the property. At least Mo's giving them a lot of context here as to what it looks like: kitchen, rooms, bathroom, etc. Here's the multi-let numbers, right? So the income, the expenses, the cash flow. He's also put some nice charts and graphs here, again just showing some future projected income, which is great. And then here you go, 15% return on investment. Guys, this is a no-brainer. A deal of this magnitude will sell pretty quickly because it's a great opportunity, because it makes a lot of financial sense. Now, here's where he's been, in my opinion, very clever. He's got exit strategy number 1. Refinance after 6 months. So you go to the bank, you ask for a loan, you extract all your money out. Your return on investment then goes to 17%, which means a bit of an increase. So that's great. That's an exit that we can look at. The second exit is Airbnb. Now here, this is very clever. He's taken a report from an Airbnb company and shown what the vacancy rate would be, how much, or the occupancy rate, how much the revenue forecast would be, the daily rates, the etc. And now he can start to run the numbers from a Airbnb point of view, which is obviously a little bit more lucrative. And then the third exit, flip the property. So sell it back to the market, recover your costs. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I think Mo has got this deal across the line, because his proposal is so professional that anybody with a potential interest in property and some savings in the bank would consider this deal. Right. So thanks, Mo, for sharing that. I hope, guys, that you got everything that you wanted, i.e., all of the content that I've got here. I just want to quickly update this button, because we are very excited to be launching a new program. It's an online property investing course, which people have been asking us about, and today we'll be launching. So, for those of you who do want the knowledge, we have created this online university. It's called the Property Bootcamp. It's learning how to invest in buy-to-lets, multi-lets, and flips. Here is the URL, so you can either quickly pop that into your URL, or you can click the button below. That'll take you to our online university. We've got essentially 10 different courses, from Property Investing 101, which is the basics, all the way to raising finance and how to use and leverage PropTech systems, how to set up the structures for a legal transaction, your negotiation, deal analysis, everything. So these are the 4 current courses that are there. Running the numbers, raising finance, marketing, and property investing. Running the numbers is obviously an exciting one because there's a lot of content there. Essentially, our courses are all about 2 to 3 hours long in terms of the length of time that the videos are. This specific course costs $797, and what you'll essentially get out of that is 7 on-demand videos, a quiz, and lifetime access. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the lessons. So the first lesson is just an introduction. Then you're looking at the gross and effective yield calculations, return on investment, rate of return, return on equity. They're all relatively short, snappy, and engaging videos. If you've been to any of our other webinars, you'll know that we focus very much on content. Now, guys, it's very exciting to be releasing this online course. And the reason why I've done that is because I think I get about 10, 15 requests a week from people wanting more advice on property. You know, they've either read my book or been on a webinar, and we want to try and help as many people as possible. I couldn't do it in my personal capacity, and not everybody can afford one-on-one coaching. You know, that's quite an expensive route. So we've taken all the content that we've created and specifically made some really engaging stuff for you to put online so that we can kind of scale our knowledge sharing. So if this is something that interests you, just go and follow that link. Go read more about what it is that our university contains, and hopefully there's something in there for you to get started with. We're also going to be having another webinar coming up next week, Thursday, with a lady called Kutso, and she's going to be speaking about how she became a property investor during lockdown. So that's next week, Thursday, 6 p.m. Just go and check on our Crowdcast channel. You'll see it's there. And please register. It's going to be a great event. In case you didn't know, this is what she's been busy working on the last few months. She's got a buy-to-let and loan deal where the return on investment is 43%. She's bought 10 units in Rosettenville. And she's working on a 42 million rand property from a developer. And this all, being done while lockdown's happening. So this is somebody that you definitely want to see what they have to share. Fantastic, guys. So let's quickly do some questions, Mo. There are quite a few here, so I'm just going to ask you to share it with me. Let's start with the first question. Okay. Other than Property 24 and private property, where can I find below market properties? So, Butumelo, I think Mo did talk quite a lot about, driving for dollars, pamphlets, your bird dog, speaking to the lawyers, the mailmen, anybody that is in contact with potentially distressed sellers, getting them on your side, SEO, online marketing, those kind of options. Because Property 24 and private property, you'll find maybe one or two deals. For me, I mostly get deals. Yeah, go for it, Mo.
So, if you look at Property 24, you're actually getting the scraps of the deals. Most of the good deals are already gone before that. So essentially, you got to think ahead of the curve, and you've got to be ahead of the agents and the brokers. And that's the only way to find good deals.
100%. Okay, here's a question for you, Mo. How does property flipping work, and is it different to sourcing?
So it is different in terms of flipping a property is essentially you finding the property, you're renovating it, and you're putting it back onto the market. So it's the whole stage. So property sourcing is very different. That we only the first stage, whereas if we find the deals, we negotiate the deals, we package the deals, and we give it to the flippers. And why this is a good technique to use? Essentially, flippers are not interested in dealing with a lot of people, dealing with the marketing and waste of time. They just want to do the deals and they want to get the money out of it as quickly as possible, and that's what you have to do. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else you would like.
No, I think that's fair. It's a fair point. What about the next question? Do you have to have a good credit score to do sourcing?
No, I don't think so, unless you hoping to borrow money from the bank to market. I'm not sure.
No.
No.
The only time you need a good credit score is if you're looking to buy the property yourself and you need to qualify for a loan. But you're not ever buying the property.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see here. Let's see here. Where do I find sourcing agents? So we've spoken about estate agents who work for, your first time buyers. What about you, Mo? Where can people find people like you, sourcing agents?
We're all around. I think just ask. I mean, the thing that people don't do is they don't ask. They say, hey, I'm looking for this. I mean, you were surprised how quickly word travels, and then boom, you've got someone in your inbox. Just ask everyone you know. You go to events, you say, I'm looking for sourcing agents. I mean, a lot of people just point you there. I mean, sourcing agents are probably everywhere when going to networking events, because they're essentially looking for clients to source deals on.
100%. And Tam, I've also just put a link to the SA Property Network website in the chat bar. That's a great networking platform where anybody and everybody that's interested in property in South Africa goes to. So check that out. Let's see here. This is quite an interesting question. So Sam's asking, once you've signed the first offer to purchase with the seller, and then you've signed an agreement with the investor, and then the third agreement is you get the seller and the buyer to sign a contract. Is that the process that you also use, Mo?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Now, in terms of that first contract that you signed, do you put some sort of clause in place that says, if I get another buyer, this contract will be replaced by another contract with the new buyer?
I do that. There's many ways to do it. I essentially, when I'm doing a deal, I'm essentially buying it for myself. But if you remember, I did say don't buy anything you're not ready to buy yourself. So essentially, I put a deal on the contract myself because I have the intention of doing it. But like I said from the get-go, I'm already explaining to the seller, look, I'm looking for a very specific thing. If my calculations from Moreno does not work out, I'm going to help you get another person on the contract. And I think it's just about being open. Like I said, the trick is with real estate agents, you can't really pull that off very well. So that's why you've got to find sellers off-market deals.
Clifford also asked you, what do you mean by ARV and MOA?
So ARV is after repair value. So say, for instance, the property that we bought, the ARV, the after repair value, which is the market value that is on now, it's about 2.5 million. And we want an investment property, so we need to buy it for, say, 1.6, which it was. And so my maximum allowable offer is 1.6 million. So I would start, so my minimum offer basically would be, without being too greedy, say 1.4 million. My maximum is 1.7. So I'm going to negotiate within that boundary. I'll start at 1.4 and we'll just deal with the seller, and then that's cool. Okay, I'll go a little bit up, maybe I'll go a little bit up. Okay, but this is where I stop. I'm not going to go any further than this. And that's essentially your MOA.
Mo, just be honest with me. Did you make up those terms? Because I've never heard those terms before.
No, I've been bigger pockets. Bigger pockets.
Oh, so the US, that's probably the US wording. Okay, cool. Let's do one more question here. A question here. This is interesting. If you're an investor, okay, and you want to work with a sourcing agent, what questions can you ask that sourcing agent to validate that they're a good sourcing agent? What do you think, Mo?
Ask them what. I think it's more what you bring to the table, essentially, because the sourcing agent has to prove to you that they actually can do the deal. So I don't have actually a good question to answer for that.
I think it's an interesting.
The best way is referrals. You got to ask people, investors, have you dealt with the sourcing agent? Hey, the best way to do it is referrals.
I think it's a good question. I've never heard that question before, but if I had to answer it, how do you know if someone's a good sourcing agent? I want to see how well they understand the deal. So that investor proposal that you sent me, Mo, the one that I quickly took us through, you left no room for doubt. You explained everything to a T. You knew your return on equity, your exit strategies, you had your reports, you had everything there. So I wasn't questioning your credibility. Yeah. But if somebody had to send me a proposal with some numbers and the numbers didn't quite make sense or something looked a bit fishy, I'd like to see how the sourcing agent responds. And how can they justify? And through that, you can start to see, does this guy know what he's talking about or not? Is he using Lightstone, TPN? Does he have credible builders? Has he signed an offer to purchase that looks, not like a pick and pay bought offer to purchase? I think those are things. It's about impressions. Yeah. If the impression of mediocrity comes through, I feel like the deal is going to be average. If the person's professional in their behavior. Because I remember, Mo, the first deal that you sent me that you wanted to source, I think you had maybe one page on it and the numbers weren't necessarily right. You were obviously learning. But the way you've grown and the way you showcase the deal now gives me a lot more confidence as an investor to work with you.
I think the same approach can be taken when you want to find a good estate agent. I remember I was doing a commercial deal, and I asked the agent, "What's the cap rate in this area?" And he's asked me, "What's a cap rate?"
Oh,
Okay,
there we go.
I'm not dealing with you. You
There we
know,
go.
it's like you didn't know simple things like that. I mean, use the basics. Just ask
Yeah,
questions. The basics. They don't understand the basics, and they giving you hogwash. Essentially, I'm not dealing with this
100%.
stuff.
100%. Well, Mo, that's all for tonight. Those are all the questions we can take at the moment. There are still a couple left, but what I usually do is I'll close the session or end it, and then I'll answer all those questions. So, Mo, thank you so much for being on the call, man. It's been a plum-pleasing pleasure to have you, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed yours. Do you want to maybe end off with your last tip on how people can get sourcing going?
I think the most important tip is consistency. A lot of people ask you, where do you find good deals? The reason I find good deals is that you stop at the 10th deal, I stop at the 100th deal when I find a good deal. I mean, I essentially stop at when I find the deal. So I'm doing 100 deals, and I'm choosing that one that actually I know 100% is going to work, and that's essentially what I'm doing. It's not an easy game. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just got to keep your chin up, and you have to be resilient, even in these times now. And you just got to keep doing it. You've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's the only way you can actually going to get anywhere in terms of property investing, in terms of wholesaling, in terms of life in general.
Awesome. Dig it. Thanks, Mo. If people do want to reach you, go to his website. Do you want to maybe just put it in the chat bar there, your website, if people want to just click it? If you are comfortable to share your email address or something like that, I can share an email at the end of the session with your contact details. Otherwise, everybody else that's been on the call, guys, thanks for being a part of this. Always great to have you guys on the call. If you need to get going and you need to go and enjoy dinner with your family, please go ahead. I'm going to now just answer all the final questions. Remember, you can come back afterwards and see the questions, or you can see a recording later on. We'll send a recording of the session later on. But if you do need to get going, you're welcome to get going. And also a big thanks to you again, Mo. Great having you on.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Cool. Cheers.
Yes.
Okay. So, guys, if you need to get going, away, Brother Bear. Check you next time. If you are going to stay on, I will answer all the remaining questions quickly. So, Tando, if I found a property through an estate agent and I want to sell the deal to an investor, is there supposed to be any legal agreement between myself and the investor? And how is the property going to be in the investor's name if I'm the one who signed the OTP with the estate agent in the first place? Okay, so Tando, you're essentially working now with the middleman of the estate agent, which makes it a little bit more complicated. Now, you can sign an offer to purchase with the estate agent, and you again have those exit clauses. So one is you need to be able to find another willing buyer within 2 weeks, and if you can't, the deal is cancelled. And number two, if you find another investor, this contract that you've signed becomes destroyed or cancelled, and a new offer to purchase is signed between the new buyer and the seller. So yeah, you follow the same approach. You've just got a middleman, an additional middleman in the pot, and they're going to eat into your commission. So I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do it. Okay, that one has been answered. How is the sourcing fee determined? So as mentioned, 6 months worth of cash flow if you're doing a buy-to-let deal, 10% of the profit if you're doing a flip. My opinion, that's not necessarily a fact, that's just what I would use. Okay, Ronald, if you introduce a property to a buyer for a fee, does that not fall into the scope of commission as an estate agent according to the Estate Agents Affairs Board? Indeed, Ronald, it does. You need to make sure that you've got a good attorney on board, right? Because it's the way you phrase it. You can earn legally a fee for introducing a seller to a buyer. But if you get a commission and the way it's worded and the way the transaction happens, it can be illegal. Okay, let's see. Next one. What requirements should I have to be in this deal? I'm assuming to do sourcing, you don't have any requirements. You don't need to be registered or you don't have to be certified. What I would say is get some education, learn how to run the numbers, how to put together a good proposal, because when you're working with an investor, you need to make sure you're doing a good deal, So you need to have the knowledge on how to put together a good deal, but you don't have to have any certifications as such. Okay, let's see here. Is sourcing similar to an assignment agreement? How does one determine the sourcing fee? Okay, so Tandeka, I've answered the sourcing fee question. I don't know what an assignment agreement is, to be honest, so I don't want to say that it is the same. And a sourcing agreement or a referral agreement is essentially one where you do something where you introduce someone to someone else and you get paid for that introduction, or you get paid for some sort of work in referring someone. Okay. Where and how do you find these deals? So I think the best answer to that is Mo's points where he spoke about driving for dollars, Facebook, all of those things. So just go and check out the recording afterwards. That'll be the best thing. Could you please describe some exit strategies that investors would use for a buy-to-let? Yeah, so similar to Mo's proposal, you could refinance, you could sell the property, flip it. You could multi-let. So if it doesn't work as a buy-to-let, could you maybe subdivide the rooms, put a couple more people into the property so that you can increase the rental and thus increase the cash flow. Maybe you could change the zoning. If it's zoned as residential, maybe zone it to a commune so that you could put students in. That increases the value of the property. So there's different ways to exit. Okay, let's see here. Lebohang. You said you could refinance and get all your money out. Please explain this. Okay, so refinancing is, let's say you buy a property for cash. You can refinance, basically go to the bank and say, I want a loan on that property and get all that money that you put out back in. So that's the concept of refinancing. Another example would be you buy a property now. In 10 years' time, you've got a lot of equity in the property. You go back to the bank and you say, hey, my property's worth more, and you refinance it so you get more financing out because the value of your property's gone up, and banks lend based on the value of the property. So that would be how you do that. What lawyer do you recommend? Okay, so the lawyer that I would recommend is Mo Attorneys. They are specialist property attorneys, and I will just put a link to their thing in the chat bar. That's just the attorney that I would use, Bruno Mo Attorneys. You can find anyone though, to be fair. Okay, let's see. Around how much should you budget for a lawyer who will help with signing the offer to purchase? Great question. I would say probably between 5,000 and 10,000 rand. And where can you find a sourcing agreement? So I'd prefer that you get one from an investor, from an attorney. So, instead of buying one from Pick and Pay or whatever. I mean, I guess you could. Maybe you could check out the SA Property Network's website. They might have those resources. We might actually also start putting up some of those kind of templates on the Property Bootcamp. It's not there yet, but we'll hopefully get there. Let's see here. Why do you negotiate the deal price before presenting it to the buyer? Well, if you don't know what the deal's price is, you don't know what the return on investment is, and then you can't really speak to a buyer about it, right? I mean, the buyer wants to know, what's my return going to be? That'll be the first question that I would ask. So if you don't know what the deal's price is, you don't know what the return is, you can't really approach an investor, because then you're approaching the investor and saying, hey, I maybe have a deal. And if they ask you any questions about it, you can't answer it and you lose credibility. Let's see here. If you have a builder to help you with the property due diligence, say produce a reno quote, are you obligated to get the builder the contract? Great question. So, yeah, let's say you've got a deal and you bring 3 builders in and they all quote you. What's the expectation of those builders? Do they all, who's going to get the work, and how do you manage that? So oftentimes what I would say to the builders is I'd say, guys, I'm happy to pay out a call out fee, which is usually 500 to 1,000 rand, and it's the fee that they charge to be called out to the property and to give a quote. And I say to them, guys, I've got 3 people giving me a quote on this, so I'm not guaranteeing work. I'll pay a call out fee. I'll pay for your time to come out and give me a quote, but I'm not guaranteeing any work. And that's how I would get around that. Okay, let's see here. Final question. Oh, wait, how do I calculate ROI? Marvin, go check out the Property Bootcamp. That's one of the lessons within the Running the Numbers course. We explain exactly how to work it out, giving you some live deals to work with. Then a question here from Sanjay. How does the new upcoming Property Practitioners Act affect a sourcing agent? Sure. That's a good question. To be honest, I don't know what the upcoming Practitioners Act says. And again, this is where the power of a good attorney comes in, because your attorney has to stay on top of all the different legal jargon and updates. So as long as you're using a good attorney or a good, legal professional that's in your power team to review your contracts and make sure that everything's above board, you should be fine. I know that when it was all under the Estate Agents Affairs Board, they had a big problem with the commission issue, but there was a workaround around that. The new upcoming act, I'm not sure how that's going to change things, to be honest. But Sanjay, I'll send an email to my attorney and forward his response to you. Great, guys. That is the 22 questions answered. If there are any final questions, I see there's still about 40, 50 of you on, which is great. We always enjoy a full house. If there's any final questions or comments, I see Marvin's also asked here, can I source commercial property? 100%. I find it's easier to source residential than commercial because there's more people willing to buy residential. So you've got more investors to sell to. Otherwise, I don't see any other questions, guys. It's been a plum-pleasing pleasure and a privilege. We'll upload the recording and send it to you in due course. Until next time, happy investing and stay safe. Cheers.